Tom Quaid from Colliers Cairns, thank you for coming this afternoon.
Pleasure to be here.
So we're just going to have a discussion regarding some common issues with development projects that you see like as a real estate agent, and any ideas and solutions that people might have to help or avoid those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one of the big things that we see with potential development sites in our market is people take the same approach that they have in a lot of capital cities.
Okay.
Which is that you want to get the highest density possible or the highest use possible.
Yep.
So what we saw particularly between say 2010 and 2020 was people would purchase multiple houses next to each other or multiple blocks next to each other with the view that they could amalgamate it, get a higher density, build units, and they'd make their millions doing it that way.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the big problem that we had in that period was that the cost of new construction for what it would actually cost you to get the development out of the ground and with a finished product was so much higher than the price that you could buy an equivalent product for.
Yes.
Was just that there was this gap that you could never surmount. So there was no point doing the development because no one would pay the level of premium that they'd have to for a new product compared to a 5 or a 10-year product.
Yep.
So a lot of those sites that might have gotten an approval or had an existing approval in there for 15, 20 units, they actually had a better end result from just sale as individual blocks, whether that be with say if it was in Parramatta Park, it might have had an old Queenslander on it, or it might have been a larger block out in Edmonton and was better off just as an acreage home rather than the minuscule amount you'd get as a development site, or potentially even going backwards with the development site.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning curve for a lot of people, and I found early in my career you almost had to break a few clients' hearts or potential clients' hearts that thought that they'd built up this fantastic area over time. They bought the neighbour's house when it came up 20 years ago, and they did it again 10 years ago with the next one.
Yep.
And it just wasn't worth this magical number that they thought it might have been.
Okay.
Because there was such a difference in the market pre-GFC to post-GFC.
For sure.
We had similar effects a little bit out of town with, again, larger sites that might have suited a large-scale development, 200, 300, 400 units, similar to what we had in Cairns 1 and the Lakes, which remain our largest unit developments here in Cairns. But again, when the cost of that style of construction just didn't stack up, what we often ended up seeing was those developments turned into small lot subdivisions.
Okay.
So projects like North Point was a great example, and some of the other ones on the northern beaches and now through Mount Peter as well, where you had say a 400 square metre block with a house fitting on that typically for a first home buyer or investor product, compared to the 600 to 800 square metre blocks that we had traditionally before that. So it was a very interesting pivot that we had in our market, that people went to a smaller home on a smaller block instead of apartments to fulfill that same kind of space in the market. But what it does mean is that now as we get further into a growing Cairns and we start running out of land, those opportunities really are gone, because there's been more money invested into alternate product there. It'd be very hard to try and amalgamate those sites again. So for the ones that do have them, we're now starting to see them coming to market, and people looking at them for different viabilities today than what we did 5 or 10 years ago.
Okay. And would you recommend developers or investors, as part of their development feasibility process, to have a chat to a local real estate agent, a local property valuer, to say, what's in demand in this market, what type of, like, do we need to do a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, what type of product is appropriate?
Absolutely. So it's both the product type and the price point.
Okay.
So from a unit perspective, the relatively few new developments we've seen in Cairns have been more geared towards a more premium product or an upgrader. So they'll have smaller numbers of units, but there'll be a larger 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, or a premium 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, as opposed to the older idea of doing a maximum number of units. So those seem to have had a little bit more success, though again we haven't had a terribly large number that do it. Certainly though, it pays spending that time and money up front to be consulting agents, consulting valuers, and getting a good idea on construction costs as well. As part of our office over the years, we've worked on a number of feasibilities for some pretty high profile sites throughout Cairns, where there's been a DA in place where there's been an intention to build 40, 50, 60, 80 units. Some of them has gotten as far that they've had all of their plans drawn up. They've even gotten down to fixtures, finishings and colours.
Yeah, well.
But then you would get to the point that you go, okay, it's going to cost us $1 million to do a 3-bedroom unit on level 9, but an equivalent unit in a 10-year-old building can sell the same one for 750 grand.
Okay, yeah.
And while there was certainly a premium that people would pay for something new because it had been so long since we'd had that new product here, that was still a very large jump to get through.
It's a big jump.
So a lot of those projects sadly have just stayed dormant since. On a smaller scale, and something that we're seeing a lot more of though, is your duplex, triplex, quadplex kind of developments.
Yep.
And there you can look at, okay, within the same square meterage for the home, you might be able to make a few tweaks and suddenly a 2-bedroom is a 3-bedroom, or a 3-bedroom can become a 4-bedroom.
Yeah.
And we found that generally speaking, if you can do it within a relatively small increase in cost, but you can get that extra bedroom or make it to that 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, suddenly your demand increases significantly. So both the demand for the product and the price you can achieve. So it might cost you an extra, say, 15 grand to get the extra bedroom in, but your sale price might be another 60 or 70.
Wow.
So that's where we've really seen value for people that are doing those smaller scale projects today, in doing the consulting work up front and talking to agents and working out where the demand is and where the values are. Those are actually turning into quite a profitable enterprise.
Yep.
So that's definitely an area where we have seen success, where unfortunately at a lot of the units there's been some great ideas, but the market just hasn't supported it yet.
Yeah, and we've certainly seen that as well. Like in our business, we have clients that come, and they have an idea in their head of a certain shape or form for their site or a certain yield, and we always make sure that clients understand that. Have you spoken to local real estate agents? It's so important. Is there actually demand for this product?
Yeah.
It can be quite we can get a planning approval. It doesn't mean that it's going to stack up, from a construction perspective.
Yeah.
Or there's even a demand for that product.
And look, oftentimes there's certainly a demand for the product, but it's just not at the price that it would have to be for someone to make money or even break even in some cases. So it's one of those interesting things, and it's been interesting to see, even over the last 12 months, where we have seen such an increased demand for housing in general, where those larger scale projects of potentially 12 to 20 dwellings still invariably end up fewer dwellings, but a higher price per dwelling, and that's really the only way that works. The alternative, it ends up being you need government money and government support to be able to make, say, a block of 12 2-bedroom units stack up. It doesn't work if real people are putting their money in their pockets and need to make anything at the other end.
That's right. Just like to wrap up, you obviously head up the Colliers business here in Cairns, and what type of sites do you have on the market at the moment? What type of properties are you looking to list?
Look, our office is a little bit unique in Cairns in that we deal with both commercial and residential property within the same office. The advantage from a development site point of view is that we've got experience running the whole way through, from that initial site selection through to the viabilities and finding what is going to be the best product mix for the site, all the way through to project sales, sales of developed product, and then even the management of them after that. So that's fairly unique, being able to take somebody all the way through. And even if you are just looking for the sale of your site rather than necessarily to do the project yourself, it can be important to have an agent that has that knowledge that can then communicate the value best to your buyer.
Yeah,
and
that's important.
Get it all coming through. So if you've got a site that you're looking at, or even if you've got a home that might have value either way, we'd love to talk to you and see what we can do in this market.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, Tom.
Pleasure.
Cheers.